So now that we have the initial configuration for Git set up, it's time to actually create our first repository. So make sure that you are in the lesson 1A folder and type the command git init. When you press enter, this should give you a confirmation message letting you know that there's been a Git repository initialized. It will be a .git folder within the folder you're in. And if you in fact do an ls-a, you will see that this .git folder has been added. This is the folder that contains all the information about this repository. So if you delete this folder, all the history, all the branches, everything about the repository will be gone, and your files will be frozen in the last state that they were in. So it's important that if you delete this, you are sure, you are completely sure that you want to delete it. Now right now, this repository isn't actually tracking anything. We can see this if we use the command get status. You'll notice that it's saying these files are untracked. And if we do a different command, get ls-files, there's no files listed. So if we want to go ahead and tell it to start tracking files, it tells us right here the command to use is git add. And so the syntax is just git add and then the file that we want to add. If we run that and then do get status, notice that it says that the file usdates.txt is ready to be committed, and that the time periods folder and its contained files are not being tracked yet. So it's important to note that we don't have to add all the files to the repository at once. Technically, we don't have to add every file in the folder ever. There can be some that we leave untracked. And we'll actually come back to that at the end of the lesson to show you ways that you can prevent Git from constantly reminding you, hey, you're not tracking this, hey, you're not tracking this. Okay, so now that we've got this file ready to be committed, or in other words, this has been staged, we need to actually create the commit. So the command is git commit, and it'll drop you into a default text editor. I've configured mine to use Vim because I prefer Vim. Yours may be Nano, and I'll put in the description how to set which text editor to use. And so you'll notice that as you read through this, it gives you some information about what you need to do. Please enter a commit message for your changes. Line starting with a pound sign will be ignored, and an empty message aborts the commit. So all of these lines will not be included in the commit message. And if we decided that we made a mistake, all we have to do is quit. So in Vim, that's just Q. And you'll notice it says aborting commit due to an empty commit message. That's useful if you get partway into a commit and realize, wait a minute, you know, I still actually need to tweak the code in some way, or if there's actually a bug that I don't want to commit because that would be silly. But let's go ahead and actually commit this time. Now, because these lines aren't actually included in the commit message, I'm going to come up with a format for the commit message that I find works well for me. And until you develop your own, I would recommend that you follow this format, but you are under no obligation to. Having said that, one thing that all git commit messages should do is start with a one-line description of the purpose of the commit. So in this case, this is the initial commit of the lesson 1A repository. And we'll see in a little bit why it's important to have a good, concise summary of the reason for this commit. So what I like to do is I like to break down the rest of the message into a couple sections. So in this case, the first section would be new files, and then enumerate the files that were added. And you might find it useful to go ahead and set a text wrapping. So in Vim, that's just the command set or :set tw, and 80 characters is usually a good width. And okay, so back to this. Because all these lines at the pound sign will not be included, I usually find it's nice to include some information about what files have been added, or what files have been changed. So I would have a modified files section. If there were any deleted files or renamed files, this sort of thing, just so that when you come back to this commit, you know right away what happened. Now, of course, we don't have any of these, so I won't include them. Sometimes I'll also include what I call an overview section that goes through a little bit of the goal for this commit. So, particularly with research code, this might be something like, for me, this could be something like, the effect of daily NO2 profiles on satellite observations, etc., etc. Just something to describe kind of in more detail the purpose of the commit. But in this case, our short little summary line is sufficient, and we only have one new file. So we'll go ahead and describe in a little more detail what this file is. So it's just a list of selected US states. And I mean, this does not have to be a very detailed description or a super detailed description, because we can see, later we'll show you how to see the line by line changes in that file. So what this is really meant to do is to give you the purpose behind this commit more than anything. So for us, that might be, we'll use to demo simple Git actions. All right. So when you're satisfied with the commit message, if you save it, so in Vim that's the :wq command, that will cause Git to actually make the commit. So now that it's made the commit, if we do git status, you'll notice a couple things. US states no longer shows up as a change to be committed, and it no longer shows up as an untracked file. That's because it's being tracked and it hasn't been changed since the last commit. If you want to see that it's being tracked, git ls files shows us that we're tracking usstates.txt. If we were to go ahead and run a new command, which is git log, this will spit out a list of our commits. And in this case, we only have one commit. And we'll go through this message in a little detail later. One thing to keep in mind is that as long as this fits on one screen, it will just print it to the screen and return you to the command line. If this extends more than one screen, it will drop it into the less pager so that you can scroll up and down, and in that case you would need to quit in order to return to the command line. Now, we've got two more files to add, both of them in the time periods folder. So we could add them with git add time periods days of week and git add time periods months.txt, or we could just do git add star.txt. If we do this and run git status again, that didn't work because they were in the subfolder. But if we were to do git add time periods, actually just star, but let's do star.txt, now it went ahead and added both of those files. So Git follows all the normal globbing rules that you're used to let you add multiple files of a given type very easily. Let's go ahead and commit this. Remember, just type git commit. And this time we're going to be adding the time periods files. We have two new files. The first is time periods / days of week. I'm going to go ahead and set my text wrapping to be 80 characters, just so I don't have to keep hitting enter. And this is just a list of days of the week, starting with Sunday. and then time periods slash months.txt, list of the 12 months of the year, unabbreviated. So you'll notice I've gone ahead and included the path from the root of the repository to each of these files. For now, that's not such a big deal because they're pretty easy to find, but as your repository gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you might find it very useful to do that so you know where these files are. So go ahead and save. If we do git status now, you'll notice it says nothing to commit, working directory clean, because all of the files are unmodified and are being tracked. And if we were to do git ls files, notice that tells us all 3 are currently being tracked.